Hello, and welcome to our daily book dive. Today I will share a book titled The Courage to be Disliked. This book is an interpretation of one genius by another. The first genius is the author of the book, Ichiro Kishimi, a highly influential philosopher in Japan. At the age of 30, Kishimi encountered the teachings of another genius, Alfred Adler's psychology, and has since dedicated himself entirely to studying Adler's ideas. The Courage to be Disliked presents the results of Kishimi's research into Adlerian psychology. If you like to get a copy, you can find the link to the book in the description below. Alfred Adler, an Austrian psychologist, was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud, and initially a follower of Freud's theories. However, he was the first to oppose Freud's framework, leading to their ideological parting. In simple terms, Freud believed that one's current condition is a result of past experiences and external influences. Adler disagreed, arguing that one's current state is solely related to one's self. Adler established individual psychology with this in mind. After reading this book, I strongly felt that in today's era, with its rapid technological and ideological evolution, it is particularly suitable to revisit Adler's thoughts. In such a fast-paced age, one needs the ability to continuously climb in their field. For example, we often see young people who achieve great success early in life, enjoying high honors, but find it difficult to sustain once the initial applause fades. This is because they lack a complete internal system of self-esteem. Adler's philosophy tells us that your success and happiness are unrelated to anyone else. Everything depends on you. His ideas help you build this internal self-esteem system. At first glance, you might think this sounds like mere motivational speak, but it isn't. Unlike superficial motivational talks, which might sound sensible initially, but lack logical basis and practicality, Adler's thoughts are grounded in a rigorous logical deduction. The conclusions derived from his philosophy not only make sense, but also stand up to scrutiny and can be debated with others. Moreover, in this book, Kishimi adopts a format similar to philosophical classics like the Analects and the Republic, a dialogue. The entire book is a conversation between a youth and a philosopher, where the youth asks questions and the philosopher answers. Kishimi chose this format because it is easy to understand, and importantly, he wanted to convey that Adler's ideas are not just clinical psychology. He is also a thinker and philosopher. The book discusses issues more on the philosophical level. Next, I will share the book in two parts. The first part discusses the reasons for our unhappiness. The second part discusses how to have what is called the courage to be disliked, and how Adler views finding that state of freedom and happiness. So, let's delve into the first part. From Adler's perspective, whose fault is our unhappiness? Where do our troubles originate? Before answering this, it's important to discuss a core idea of Adler's, that you have the power to make your own choices. Specifically, your life is not shaped by others, but by your own choices. Your current situation has nothing to do with other people or your past experiences. This is the fundamental difference between Adler and Freud. For example, the book mentions a female student who is afraid of social interaction to the point of blushing. The philosopher asks her, "What would you like to do if your fear of blushing were cured?" The girl responds that there is a boy she likes and wants to date, but her blushing has prevented her from expressing her feelings. She also says that if her fear were cured, she would confess her feelings to him right away. Upon hearing this, your first reaction might be to wonder about the source of the girl's misfortune. Was it caused by parental humiliation in childhood, making her fearful of strangers? Or perhaps a traumatic romantic rejection? If you think this way, Freud would agree with you. Using past traumas, especially from childhood, to explain current unhappiness seems logical. However, Adler disagrees. He argues that relying solely on past causes to explain current issues leads to a deterministic view, that our present and even our future are entirely shaped by past experiences, and that change is impossible. This viewpoint is known as causality. In contrast, Adler champions teleology, Teleology suggests that the girl's ongoing struggle with blushing isn't due to a lack of appropriate treatment, but because she chooses this misfortune. How so? Adler believes that what the girl most fears and wishes to avoid is rejection by the boy she likes, which would strike a blow to her self-esteem. As long as she suffers from the blushing syndrome, she can tell herself that it's the only reason she can't pursue a relationship, thereby avoiding the need to take the risk of confessing her feelings. It's a protective fantasy that she maintains, believing that curing her fear would magically enable her to have love. Of course, her fear of blushing is real, not imagined, but it remains her choice. This example brings us back to a core concept of Adler's. Your current unhappiness is the result of choices you've made. The reason you can't change is that you've decided not to. Next, let's discuss a familiar phenomenon: the feeling of inferiority. It refers to the unpleasant emotional experience that arises when comparing oneself unfavorably to others. Interestingly, Adler was the first to explain this feeling, which in German encompasses both inferiority and a sense of low self-worth. In Adler's view, everyone experiences feelings of inferiority. But these feelings are not inherently negative. Why? Adler posits that humans, inherently powerless, are born into this world striving for superiority, for improvement. A toddler learns to stand and walk in pursuit of superiority. Learning to speak and communicate with others is driven by the same pursuit. Even the scientific progress throughout human history is a manifestation of this drive. Thus, feelings of inferiority serve as a motivation for continual self-improvement. However, as you might have observed, some people become very negative due to their inferiority, doing nothing, and resigning themselves to the belief that they are incapable of change. What's going on here? According to Adler, this should not be called a feeling of inferiority, but an inferiority complex. An inferiority complex refers to those who use their feelings of inferiority as excuses. Statements like, "I can't find a partner because I'm not attractive enough," or "I can't be successful because of my low education level," typify this. Such assertions that extend beyond simple feelings of inferiority to a more pervasive complex are, again, a personal choice. This leads to the question: why would someone choose to maintain an inferiority complex as their shield? The answer, in one word, is avoidance. Adler believed that interpersonal relationships are the source of all troubles and emotional disturbances. Why is this? Consider that, to achieve the goal of not getting hurt in a relationship, many people choose to focus solely on their flaws, minimizing their involvement in interpersonal relationships. By staying within their shells, they minimize interactions with others, and if rejection or hurt occurs, they can comfort themselves with the reasoning, "It's because of my flaws that I'm rejected. Without these flaws, I would be likable." Essentially, by choosing to weaponize their misfortune, they perpetuate their need for it. Beyond the inferiority complex, another common psychological issue is the superiority complex, where individuals constantly compare themselves to others to affirm their own superiority. These individuals seek to prove their worth by capitalizing on the misfortunes of others, always striving to be on top. Are such individuals truly happy? Certainly not. Their anxiety and unrest grow whenever someone appears to surpass them, and they may resort to any means necessary to reclaim their sense of superiority. As you can see, anyone enmeshed in the complex web of social interactions is bound to experience troubles. Thus, Adler states, all human troubles stem from interpersonal relationships. To eliminate these troubles, one would have to live alone in the universe. That concludes the first part. Adler believes all troubles originate from interpersonal relationships. Our current circumstances are not dictated by past experiences, but by the meanings we assign to them. Your entire situation is the result of your own choices. From this perspective, Adler's psychology is essentially about courage. If you are someone striving to overcome challenges, if you are someone dissatisfied with the status quo and climbing another peak in life, you need the courage to assign meaning to past experiences, the courage to actively choose change, and the courage to be disliked in various relationships. Part 2. Now, let's discuss the second part, focusing on how to gain the courage to be disliked and find a state of freedom and happiness. Starting from the idea that yeast all the troubles stem from interpersonal relationships, Adler posits that everyone faces three major life tasks: work, friendship, and love. At first, you might think that these tasks are inseparable from our complex social network. Does that mean we need to spend a lot of energy maintaining the relationships around us to manage these tasks well? Not at all. Adler argues that managing these tasks relies not on others, but on ourselves. He aims to help us establish a comprehensive internal system of self-esteem. This system's construction requires specific actions and psychological development. Let's start with the action aspect. Consider a common scenario. A child who dislikes studying, doesn't pay attention in class, doesn't do homework properly, and spends all day playing video games. If you are a parent, what would you typically do? Most likely, you'd try everything possible to make the child study, enrolling them in tutoring classes, hiring tutors, and sometimes resorting to stern lectures or punishments. However, as you can imagine, these forceful methods rarely make a child genuinely love studying. Some parents might focus on fostering a child's interest in learning instead. But from Adler's perspective, none of this is important. What you should consider first isn't, how can I make the child study? But whose task is it for the child to study? Studying is the child's task, and parents commanding the child to study represents interference in someone else's task, inevitably leading to conflict. We must differentiate our tasks from others. As mentioned earlier, Adler pointed out that all troubles arise from interpersonal relationships, which we can further define as stemming from meddling in others' tasks or having our tasks interfered with by others. Simply recognizing and respecting task separation can significantly transform interpersonal dynamics. Still, you might disagree, arguing that making a child study should be a parent's responsibility and duty, or at least a shared task between parent and child. How could this be seen as undue interference? The answer is simple. Consider who bears the consequences of a decision. If a child opts not to study, the repercussions, such as poor grades or failing to enter a good school, are ultimately borne by the child, not the parents. Therefore, studying is the child's own task. However, it's important to note that Adler's psychology does not advocate permissiveness. Permissiveness represents an attitude of indifference toward what the child does. Adler's approach is not about being permissive. It promotes protecting the child while being aware of their activities. Parents should always be ready to offer ample support to their children. They should not give unsolicited advice when the child has not sought help. This is task separation, distinguishing the task of helping the child succeed from the child's task of managing their own learning. Task separation is a crucial step in building an internal system of self-esteem and serves as a practical guide for action. After discussing the behavioral aspect, let's examine how to establish a stable internal system of self-esteem at the psychological level. As social beings, humans naturally seek approval. No one enjoys being criticized or disliked. Let's conduct a thought experiment, starting from our natural inclination to be liked and our aversion to being excluded. What would it take to ensure that no one dislikes us? The most effective strategy would likely involve catering to others' preferences and demonstrating loyalty to everyone we encounter. If there are 10 people around you, you might promise to make each of them happy. However, this approach is fraught with contradiction. Despite your intentions to avoid dislike by pledging loyalty to these 10 individuals, the reality is that no one can satisfy everyone. Such promises are soon exposed, resulting in lost credibility and increased personal distress. In essence, living to meet others' expectations, entrusting your life to others, is irresponsible both to the people around you and to yourself. Conversely, Adlerian psychology rejects the pursuit of others' approval. Adler argues that it is precisely this pursuit that kills your freedom. We do not live to fulfill others' expectations, nor do others live to fulfill ours. If we constantly seek approval and worry about others' opinions, we end up living someone else's life. Thus, in Adler's view, true freedom involves the courage to be disliked. However, this does not mean that being disliked is a state we should actively pursue. Adler wants us to understand that being disliked is simply evidence of living freely according to our own terms. Exercising freedom comes at a cost. In interpersonal relationships, the price of freedom is not being accepted by others. In other words, whether I want to be liked is my concern, but whether you actually like me is your concern, not mine. Finally, let's discuss how Adlerian psychology views the concepts of value and happiness. As previously mentioned, Adler believes that interpersonal relationships are the source of all troubles. However, he also views them as a source of happiness. Happiness derived from relationships can be lower-level happiness or higher-level happiness. Lower-level happiness is comparative and obtained through relationships. For example, you might feel happy because you scored higher than everyone else in class, because your income is higher than your peers, or because your child outperforms others. But Adler labels this type of happiness as low-level because it relies on someone else's misfortune. Higher-level happiness, on the other hand, comes from a sense of community, a key concept in Adlerian psychology. Kishimi, the author, emphasizes that without understanding this concept, one cannot fully grasp Adler's psychology. What is the sense of community? It refers to a sustained sense of contribution. Whether in a family, school, or workplace, the community can foster happiness. In a family community, your happiness comes from being needed by your family. In a workplace, creating value for the company can bring happiness. However, we often see individuals who lose their sense of purpose and happiness almost immediately upon retirement because they are no longer needed, losing that sense of contribution to the community. Conversely, many wealthy individuals who possess more money than they could ever spend continue to work diligently. Why? Not because of greater desires, but because they still require a sense of contributing to society. This type of happiness is not obtained through comparison. This is what Adler calls the sense of community, a continuous, valuable sense of contributing to others. However, it's important to note that this sense of contribution is still independent of others. Adler opposes sacrificing oneself for the community. He emphasizes that this sense of happiness can also be achieved invisibly. Your pursuit of happiness begins and ends with yourself. Your contributions and value, although manifested within the community, ultimately have nothing to do with others. You do not need their approval or reciprocation. Conclusion. Finally, let me share some personal reflections. Have you noticed that Adler's philosophy, when placed in today's context, can be described with a more vivid term, closing the loop? More precisely, it's about completing your own loop. This means that your actions and thoughts should form a loop within yourself. For instance, when you compliment someone, you might unconsciously hope for their acceptance. When you apologize, you might pay special attention to whether the other person will forgive you. But Adler's philosophy teaches us that these external reactions are not what's important. What matters is your own belief that what you are doing is right and meaningful. I once read an article by Professor Wan Wei called Elite Level Apology, which discussed how elites apologize not to regain trust, but to reflect on what kind of person they want to be. Elite apologies focus on personal lessons learned and progress made from the situation. They do not try to control whether the other person forgives them, they only control themselves. This might just be the elite spirit our era most needs. Lastly, the book's author, Ichiro Kishimi, mentioned that truly understanding Adler's psychology might require as much time as half one's age. In other words, if you start learning at 40, it might take 20 years to master. A 20-minute audiobook session is not enough to fully cover Adler's philosophical thoughts. If you are interested in this theory, I encourage you to read the original book, which you can find in the electronic books section. If you discover any valuable ideas from the book, please feel free to share them in the comments section. Congratulations on finishing another book today. Thank you for your support and attention. You can find the link to the book in the description below. If you want to listen to more books like this, leave your comments, give us a like, and subscribe. Thank you!